What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we have a very exciting episode planned for you. We're going to be talking about Ruby, Amber, Mufasa, which is a deck that I definitely love. I'm doing some things a little bit different. Some of the deck list is stuff that you may have seen before, but we're winding down on set 5, talking about our last few deck lists. Probably going to be talking about some speculation on cards that I think will be great in the next set, just before that set does come out, so you know what to maybe try to get your hands on while the prices are low. If the prices are low on some of these cards, or if they come out of the gate hot, we'll just have to wait and see. As always, big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. You guys are the real MVPs and making the gears turn on the channel. I do appreciate everything that you do. I'm gonna have some more Patreon exclusive content coming very soon, so if you guys want to check that out, hop over to the Patreon. If you want to get your hands on those playmat files and enchanted proxy files, that is a great way to do so. You can join any tier for a limited amount of time, download those files to your heart's content, and then leave if you'd like. If you'd like to stick around with it in the long term, it is certainly appreciated. It just helps us to fund better giveaways as time moves forward. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into talking about Amber, Ruby, Mufasa. So the first card we're playing, and this is going to be a 4 of, is going to be Daisy Duck Donald's Date, a 1-cost uninkable character, 1/4 stat line, questing for 2. You may know about it already, but I'll just go ahead and talk about it anyway. And that is going to be her ability, Big Prize. Whenever this character quests, each opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character card, they may put it into their hand, otherwise they put it on the bottom of their deck. I do think it's worth noting the may put it into their hand portion of that. I actually had a game where I was playing against Daisy and I read the card and I was like, oh, may, perfect, because the person had played 3 whole new worlds on me. I was playing Ruby Amethyst. I was very low on cards in my deck, so I was able to actually deny drawing off of that. I was hitting characters off my top deck. I'm like, I'll just ship it to the bottom. Like, I hit a Merlin Rabbit. I didn't want to draw any more cards, so I wasn't going to want to play the rabbit. Drawing something else was actually kind of better, so I just went ahead and shipped the Merlin Rabbit to the bottom. I couldn't ink it. It wasn't useful to me at that point in the game. Daisy deck, super aggressive card. Madam Mim Fox is her main crux in the meta right now. There are things like Brawl that deal with her, but brawling a 1 cost definitely doesn't feel great, but she is fantastic in this deck with her stat line and a great way to put the pressure on right at the beginning. The only other 1-drop in the deck, we are on 4 Kita Atlantean, a 1-cost inkable character, 2/2 stat line, questing for 1. That's really all she's doing. She is here as a shift target for the big Kita, and just to give you something else to play on 1 if you need to get something down. Don't want to have a ton of 1-drops in a Mufasa deck. Jumping over to the 2-cost slot, we are on 4 Simba Protective Cub, a 2-cost inkable character, 2/3 stat line with Bodyguard. I think this is a card that's overlooked in the late game. Like, people feel like you can really only play it with aggro, where you're coming down hot on turn 1 and then you need to protect whatever you're playing on turn 1 with a turn 2 Simba. It's also a play that's become less relevant with things like Daisy Duck in the meta, but he is a great way to protect Kita in the early game. And in the late game, even if you hit him off of Mufasa, it can be actually pretty funny, because somebody may challenge, take out your Mufasa first and keep their other characters open to deal with whatever comes down from your Mufasa into play exerted. But when you hit something like a Simba, all of a sudden they're wasting an attack potentially of a big character into Simba, because they do have to attack him first because of that Bodyguard ability. So Simba can be kind of a menace. I think he's really funny. It's a card I like. Next up in the 2-drop slot, we are on 4 Mother Gothel, Withered and Wicked, a 2-cost inkable character, 3/4 stat line. However, when this character enters play, it is going to enter play with 3 damage on it. So when it comes into play, it's kind of a 3/1 stat line, questing for 1. Fantastic synergy with Rapunzel. She's going to come down, be a 3/1, have 3 damage on her already. If they're not outing her in real time, you can get that Rapunzel heal trigger. Or if you're on turn 6 of the game, you have 6 ink in play, you can go ahead and play Gothel and Rapunzel in the same turn, draw 3 cards, which is always great. Then all of a sudden you have a 3/4 on the board in addition to your 1/5 Rapunzel. One of our 2 actions in the deck, I am on 2 Bare Necessities, a 2-cost inkable action song. I think this is super necessary in a deck like this, where you need to deal with those potential big removals. If any deck where you're playing Amber and you're not drawing a ton of cards, you really want to take advantage of the Bare Necessities to deal with board wipes, because you're not necessarily going to be able to recover from a board wipe immediately, like a deck playing something like Whole New World or Ruby Amethyst, which is just drawing a ton of cards off of its Amethyst cards. Bare Necessities, when you play it or sing it, you're going to look at your opponent's hand, which is great to begin with, and you can remove any non-character card from it. So it's going to deal with locations, items, songs, actions, all that good stuff. So fantastic. There's certain matchups where you really want to see that card. You want to potentially even try to mulligan for it if you can. Over in the 3-drop slot, we are on 4 Sisu Emboldened Warrior, a 3-cost inkable character, 1/4 stat line questing for 2, also with a stat modifier. Surge of Power, this character gets +1 attack for each card in your opponent's hand. So if your opponent's holding 6 cards, everybody knows this is a game that's about drawing a ton of cards, so a lot of times your opponent will have multiple cards in their hand, and Sisu is just going to be getting that much bigger. It also is pretty funny into things like Brawl and Madame Medusa. They have to get their cards in their hand down below a certain amount before they're able to target Sisu. Keep in mind though, with those triggers, if somebody has 3 cards in their hand and they play Madame Medusa, it is going to lower her attack to 3 or less as Madame Medusa is coming into play, and she will be a legal target for that trigger. Next up in the 3-drop slot, I'm only on 2 of these with this particular build, but I still think this card's pretty good. It kind of makes your opponent deal with it right away, and if they can't, then it is going to be able to potentially give you some great value going into turn 4, and that is Doc, Leader of the 7 Dwarfs, a 3-cost inkable character, 2/3 stat line, questing for 2, which is great to help keep the pressure on. And whenever this character quests, you may pay 1 less for the next character you get into play, so it's going to jump you right into things like Mufasa going into turn 4, as well as some of the other 5 drops we'll talk about later in the deck, and reducing the cost of any character you play, not just 5 drops. Next up, we are on another bodyguard, kind of for the same reason we are on Simba. He is funny when he comes into play, and you can get that bodyguard protection trigger off of him. He's not great to come into play during your opponent's turn in the sense that you're going to lose the lore ability, but he's a 3-cost inkable, 2/3 stat line, questing for 1, so same stat line as Simba. He does have bodyguard like I mentioned, but when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore for the turn. He is potentially going to let something quest for that 1 extra lore. Then our only other non-character card in the deck, we are on 2 Brawl, a 3-cost inkable action, banish chosen character with 2 or less attack. Great way to deal with certain things in certain matchups. You don't have a lot of good ways to deal with evasive characters, for instance, with this deck. So if you're playing into something like Diablo, Brawl can be a fantastic answer for that. And Bare Necessities is particularly good in that matchup as well. It does deal with a bunch of other stuff too, but Diablo is such a menace. I think he's the main one worth mentioning. Jumping into the 4-cost slot, we're on 2 Sven Reindeer Steed, a 4-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 2. When you play this character, you may ready chosen character. They can't quest or challenge for the rest of the turn, so they're not going to be able to do anything else during that turn, except for sing, if singing is relevant with something like the Bare Necessities, but that is a very unlikely scenario with this particular deck. He's a great way to keep that lore pressure on, and if you hit him off of something like Mufasa, he comes into play exerted, but he may potentially let you ready something else on your board to keep protected from attacks. Like I said, a lot of times in those instances where you're playing against somebody who knows how to challenge into Mufasa, they're going to try to take out the Mufasa first to keep other characters open to take out whatever you flip. So when you get something like Sven and get to untap something else that maybe they wanted to take out, it can be pretty funny. Next up, we are on 4 Rapunzel, gifted with healing, a 4-cost inkable character, 1/5 stat line, questing for 2, with the ability Gleam and Glow, like I mentioned earlier. Fantastic synergy with Mother Gothel. When you play this character, remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters, draw a card for each damage removed this way. So there are many instances with this deck where she is potentially going to be getting you that 3-card draw. She's even fantastic with Daisy Duck if she has a little bit of damage on her, but even when she's only drawing you 2 cards or even 1 card, she can still be really good to help you keep the pressure on going into the late game. Next up, the star of the show, you've heard me talk about it a bit. We are on 4 Mufasa, Betrayed Leader, a 5-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 2. When this character is banished, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, which it very likely will be since we are on 56 characters with this deck, you may play that character for free and they enter play exerted, otherwise put it on the top of your deck. Also questing for 2, if they banish it right away, you can potentially flip into something even more aggressive. One of those more aggressive options still in the 5-cost slot, and another great card to ramp into with Doc going into turn 4 is a 5-cost inkable Maui, hero to all, a 6/5 stat line, rush and reckless. I gotta say, the way that the power is going in this game of cards as new sets come out, I really think if you saw Maui come out in a modern set, he probably would at least be uninkable, because this card is just gross. Coming down and rushing right away, reckless seems like a drawback, but it really doesn't hurt him all that much. Maui, fantastic card. One of the best cards in the game by a clear mile. Then the last 5-cost, and hopefully coming down for less than 5, that's why we got those 1-drop Kitas in the deck, is Kita, Protector of Atlantis, a 5-cost inkable character, 3/5 stat line, questing for 2, shifting for 3, so potentially able to come down on turn 3, or you can do something even funnier like get Doc out on turn 3, quest in with him on turn 4, get Keita out, and develop a 2-drop in addition to that. And when you play this character, all characters get -3 strength until the start of your next turn, so it's a great way to keep your opponents from getting favorable trades in your board. Keep in mind that is not going to affect rush characters. Anything that comes into play after that trigger has been put into effect is still going to have its full attack. The first character in the 6-drop slot, we're on 2 Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen. She has kind of become not quite as strong in the meta since there are a lot of go wide decks that'll just sacrifice something that they don't care about, but she is still really good, and flipping into her with Mufasa is still very good. She's super effective into those Sapphire matchups at taking out things like Tamatoa or other big threats, but she is a 6-cost uninkable character, 3/4 stat line, shifting for 4, questing for 2. She doesn't have a shift target in this deck, but when you play this character, each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. So again, when they are not on a go wide strategy, they've got one big character out. She is very effective. Next up, we have Madame Medusa the Boss, a 6-cost uninkable character, 4/4 stat line, questing for 1. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 3 attack or less. Great way to take out a lot of those threats, great way to take out Robin Hood and many other things in the meta. Robin Hood is the main one that comes to mind. Beast Tragic Hero is another great one, so she's really good into those Emerald matchups. She's going to be another potential answer to Diablo if it's a little bit later in the game, and she's going to be a body with a 4/4 stat line, so she doesn't die to other Medusas, and she's out of the range of a lot of that steel damage other than something like Along Came Zeus. And she's great to flip into with Mufasa. Now we're getting into some of the big hits with Mufasa that can be particularly funny. Couple one-offs, the first one being Stitch Carefree Surfer, a 7-cost inkable character, 4/8 stat line, questing for 2. When you play this character, if you have 2 or more characters in play, you may draw 2 cards, so he's a great way to just keep up with that card draw into the late game. If you hit him off Mufasa, he's fantastic. If you draw into him, particularly in the early game, he's probably just going to be getting inked, but he's very cool, and this art for Stitch is particularly awesome. Next up in the 7 slot, another one-off. We're on 1 Scar Vicious Cheater. Pretty neat to have him in a Mufasa deck. He's not something you're always seeing getting played. Flipping into him with Mufasa is kind of a mixed bag, but if you can go ahead and play him down and actually take advantage of his ability, he can be really good, and that may potentially happen in some of those grindier games. But he's a 7-cost uninkable character, 6/5 stat line with Rush, so same stat line as Maui, but costing a little bit more to come down. He is questing for 2, however, and doesn't have Reckless, so he does have some differences to Maui, and he does have Daddy Isn't Here to Save You as an ability. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of the turn, but he can most definitely challenge again, so he can be a potential way to wipe out your opponent's board without wiping out your board, as opposed to something like a Be Prepared. He can also potentially take out a couple of your opponent's characters and a location, stuff like that. He is going to stay tapped at that point, or you can take out a couple characters and just have them straight up ready at the end of your turn. But Scar Vicious Cheater is definitely a great card. It's still a staple in the meta, mostly seeing play in Ruby Sapphire. Moving over to the 8-cost slot, we have the Sisu Empowered Sibling, 8-cost uninkable character, 5/4 stat line, questing for 3, so super aggressive quester in the mid to late game. She is shifting for 6, so if you're able to keep that smaller Sisu, that 3-cost Sisu on the board, or play it a turn prior, play it on like turn 5 to go ahead and take advantage of this on shifting on the turn 6, is super good. It is coming down even sooner in the game than Be Prepared, and dealing with a lot of characters in the meta right now. A lot of those opposing characters in Steel Song that are going to be really relevant, like Cinderella, Ursula, Ariel, mostly their main singers. She isn't going to hit Naveen and stuff like that in this deck, but when you play this character, banish all opposing characters with 2 or less attack. Super good. Another potential one-sided Be Prepared in certain matchups. One card in the 9-cost slot, we have 2 Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, a 9-cost inkable character, 7/5 stat line, questing for 2. You know her, you love her. She's got the ability Dragon Fire. When you play this character, you may banish chosen character. Super good hit off Mufasa. With this deck, the way that it's drawing cards, you're probably not going to be hitting 9 ink in a lot of matchups, so you may be just inking her if you're drawing into her, but if you hit her with Mufasa, she can be really super good to swing the tempo in your favor. Then the 6th card, even though it's in the 10-drop slot, you can sometimes play and you can sometimes flip into Mufasa with, and that is going to be Churnerbog Evildoer, a 10-cost uninkable character, 9/9 stat line, questing for 3. He is going to be fantastic, especially if you can get him into play against the steel matchups to get your deck back together if they keep wheeling you, which if they're playing well, they wouldn't, because with your limited card draw in this deck, they're not going to really benefit from wheeling you. He's got 2 abilities. The Power of Evil: for each character in your discard, you pay 1 less to play him, so that's where I say there are instances where you'll be able to play him for 6 or 7 ink. And Summon the Spirits: when you play this character, shuffle all character cards from your discard into your deck. Again, 9/9 stat line, questing for 3. Absolutely gross in the late game. Great way to close out games. If you flip into him with Mufasa, it can be absolutely disgusting. But that is the Ruby Mufasa deck. Like I mentioned, I've got a couple cards that are a little bit off meta in there. Some of the stuff is more what you would expect out of Ruby Mufasa. Do you think this is a good deck list? Do you think there's cards I should have played more of or less of, or cards I shouldn't have played of all and should have played something else? Definitely let me know. I always love to hear it in the comments below. Remember to slap that like button if you get the chance. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, now is a great time to do so. We're approaching 2,000 subscribers in another giveaway, so definitely stick around for that. As always, thank you for sticking around to the end. And when you see those toys, video games, and decks featuring sweet, sweet James Earl Jones Mufasas off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.